Welcome everyone, and today we are going to look at a very interesting question. And that question is, why does medical intelligence beat medical AI? And maybe you wonder what even the difference is between these two. They sound very similar, but there is a crucial difference. The difference is that medical AI is a tool in search for a solution. It's a hammer in search for a nail. And what I mean by that is, it is basically based around the AI concept of large language models, transformer models, pushed into medicine, and then it's looking around and trying to find out, how can I generate value? And in another video, we were looking at all the different startups they develop in these different areas, from platform models to deep foundational models, all the way to the application layer. And that this application layer in medicine is very broad, and that there's a fundamental problem about how startups in medical AI go about business. Let me explain what that problem is. I always use this very simple model to explain the general, bigger economic problem in healthcare. And that economic problem is that when you look at the patient symptom continuum, basically on the left, you have no symptoms, so you're happy, you're healthy, nothing's happening. And on the very right, you have emergencies, right? So you have a broken arm, or you can't breathe, or some bad stuff is happening. And in between you have severe symptoms closer to the emergencies, and then you have light or diffuse symptoms. That is how your life looks like as a patient. You always fall on one of these. And the problem is that the current medical system is really skewed towards emergency and severe symptoms. So I indicated here roughly directionally on these gray bars, what is the key capability of the current medical system? Well, it is designed around severe symptoms and emergencies. And here in the no symptom or light or diffuse symptom level, medicine today has very little tools to offer us. Maybe you're wondering now, why would it offer us tools? Because, we don't need anything, we have no symptoms, but that's wrong. Let's look at the status of disease. Now here, what we are focused on is what I call trauma, war, and end stage. And with war, I literally mean war. These things were developed when the world was at war. In the late 1800s, in Europe, all over the place, you had war. You had the Civil War in America. Medicine was designed to solve two problems. Trauma, you're missing a leg, you have a bullet wound to the tummy, or infectious diseases. So surgery and antibiotics that were invented back then. That is what the whole system to this day is structured around. That is the idea of medicine, of traditional, conventional medicine. Severe symptoms, of course, lead up to that, so you also have some capability there. And medicine does a great job there. And don't get me wrong, I'm very happy that we can do that. All of us can have a trauma, and then we need to care. But when you look at where the actual life-saving potentials of medicine today, it is actually not in emergency and end stage. I indicated here with orange how many lives could we save in America every single year in these different areas of disease, interventions in these different areas. Now on the right, the potential is very low. Why is it low? Because we did a good job. Medicine did a good job. We solved these problems mostly, but there's not much you can squeeze out. Maybe 50,000 lives or something if you would boost our emergency response capabilities and hospital procedural quality. The real potential here is to defeat the real causes of death that drive death today in the Western world, which are the four horsemen: cancer, cardiovascular, neurodegenerative, and metabolic disease, from diabetes to cancer to strokes to heart disease, to Alzheimer, Parkinson's. We know that the emergency, trauma, war, end stage, the end stage piece of chronic diseases is very hard to solve and is probably unsolvable. You cannot defeat late stage cancer at scale. Very difficult. Now we are all looking for a cure, and that's great. It just doesn't make much sense when you understand the numbers. It makes much more sense to intercept these cancers at early stage. And so when you look at this, there is an imbalance here. The big transformational next step of medicine clearly lies on the left side, when you have no symptoms, but your diseases already start to occur and evolve. That's where we have to interfere with the course of disease. Now, maybe you're asking yourself, what does it all have to do with artificial intelligence and the revolution that's going on in medicine? Well, that's exactly the problem I wanted to throw in this model, because before you even start doing things as a startup or investor, you have to understand where the money is, where the upside is. And with money, I mostly mean the savings here, to save lives and save crazy amounts, trillions of dollars in healthcare costs. If we could intercept the four horsemen early stage, at the earliest stage of disease, when it's invisible with no symptoms, you would save roughly $2 trillion every single year and save 600,000 or more lives. These lives are just the ones under 75 years old. You would probably save more at the elderly. So that is the framework we have to develop AI under in medicine. And that is the framework that turns artificial intelligence into medical intelligence. Medical intelligence focuses on that first problem, not on the tiny little thing you can can do in the end. So let me explain more what that medical intelligence problem actually is now that we understand where to focus. The medical intelligence problem is the fundamental paradigm of medicine that is not well understood by physicians and the entire educational and healthcare system. So I came up with this system here after a long time thinking about the problem. What at its core is medicine? Maybe you saw the movie What is a Woman by Matt Walsh, where he asks everyone what is a woman. I would love to ask a bunch of doctors and healthcare executives, what is medicine? Hard to get a good answer. So I tell you, a medicine is a medical intelligence problem, and here's why. You are a patient, and what medicine is, it combines data it gets from the patient. It gets multiplied with the capability of generating insight from the data, and then it's multiplied with the quality of guidance that the patient gets out of that insight from medicine. Together, these three things is what I call medical intelligence, and these X's in between are actually multipliers. So I'm driving that towards a formula here where you can get like a sense of what is actually happening here. And by multiplying data with insight and guidance, you are getting to something that I call protection. So the purpose of medicine is to provide medical protection, to achieve life extension, health span extension, and to prevent people from dying. Now that's a new definition of medicine. Doctors would say, well, medicine is about the treatment and diagnosis of disease. Well, maybe. I would say the purpose of medicine is to not die, to protect your patients from death. It is a big difference, but I think that is the future of medicine. And you do that through these three things. And if you multiply that, you can actually quantify this whole thing. How much data does your physician get? How much insight can your physician then generate from the data? How much intelligence? I don't mean to insult anyone on the IQ side or knowledge side. I'm just asking as a technician, as an engineer here, how much insight per data point can you generate? And insight means the connectivity of all the data you get from the patient with the global, historic, and current medical knowledge. With 32 million scientific publications, with thousands and thousands of databases, with endless amounts of government guidelines and recommendations, how much of that do you actually know in your mind? How much data you get to multiply this with your insight capabilities? And then how can you translate that into the correct guidance for the patient and provide guiding systems for the patient to execute on the recommended prevention or treatment strategy? Together, when you multiply that, that gives you your protection level. And what I did here is I marked different options, how much of each bar you actually get. So you can get a lot or you can get little of data. You can get a lot of insight and intelligence on the data or just a little bit. And you can then translate this into a lot of competent guidance for the patient or a little. And imagine this is a scale from 1 to 10, right? You get 1 times 1 times 1 gives you 1. What 10 times 10 times 10 gives you 100. So there is a multiplicative relationship here that is important because 10 to 1, 10 to 1, 10 to 1 doesn't sound too catastrophic. It sounds bad, but not too catastrophic. But 1 to 100, the outcome of that formula tells you how bad it actually is. So in a new system of medicine, in a better system of medicine, we would systematically optimize medicine around these three central drivers of medical protection. What is the amount of data we generate? What is the amount of insight per data point we generate? And what is the amount of patient guidance where we translate that into, force on the ground for the patient protection from insight and data? Now, when it comes to preventative protection, these three things add up like this: data, insight, and action. And they provide a certain level of protection, right? As we just saw. But they do so on a timeline to wrap up the whole model. They do so on a timeline. So everything you saw before is true for year 1 when you do that, or time point 1. But it needs to be true in time point 2 too, right? If you get 100 score for protection in year 1 and in year 2 you get a 0 because you're not doing anything, well, that lowers your total protection. Mathematically, the whole thing of medical protection equates to an area under the curve. An area under the curve, which is a function of time and protection, right? Here's your medical intelligence power, data times insight times action or guidance, gives you medical intelligence. And here's a timeline. So this has to happen continuously. And that maximizes your medical protection. So here you see the maximum volume or amount of protection you can get over the timeline. And we have to understand the area under the curve is the entire area from here all the way to here. So let's assume you do conventional check-ins with your physician. You get 5 data points. What's your weight? Do you have a cuff? Can you walk straight? You know what they do. The physician then thinks about your answers like, well, back in med school, they said, if the patient says ABC, it seems to be fine. And then they give you very weak guidance. They say like, oh, you're a little overweight, lose some weight, work on your nutrition, exercise. I don't know how, but I'm telling you, figure it out. So you get a tiny amount of protection here, very little data, very little insight, and super little guidance. And you get it every 3 years, right? For example. Now the problem is, here's your protection gap if you do that. You get that little piece and you get that little piece. But what about that piece and that piece? And what about in year 3 when you get this checkup? What about doing a full body MRI? What about getting genomic data points? What about 10 billion genomic data point in a liquid biopsy for cancer detection? What about all the modern tools that we have to intercept all these diseases early stage? They are not being applied in standard of care. What about connecting all these tremendous data points to AI-guided models that understand and have read 32 million peer-reviewed publications, that have read, dozens and dozens of the most advanced medical textbooks, maybe hundreds? What about these models to make sense of all the new data you're getting in? Well, then you would get 100%, but you're definitely not getting that in normal care. All of that results in these 600,000 deaths per year that are avoidable because all these chronic diseases, the four horsemen, slip through the cracks. That is very, very bad. And when you add this up over our example here, 6 years timeline, you're talking about 3.6 million dead people in America because of that care gap. So that's pretty dramatic. Now, when you take a step back, that is why I believe medical intelligence is so much more powerful than just artificial intelligence in medicine. Because what you see is people throw AI capabilities and large language models not at that problem, because that problem is a new problem that is not well recognized by healthcare and medicine. Why? Because as you recall, healthcare and medicine skews towards the rear end of that symptom continuum and deals with emergency care and severe symptoms, not with prevention and intercepting early stage diseases where we can actually save hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. So medical intelligence goes by first principles, identifies the real opportunity in medicine here, and then throws the full capability and force of large language models and transformer models against that problem to digest much greater precision data we can apply in annual precision screenings to make much more sense out of patient data that we can generate now from scratch, and to provide continuous real-time guidance to patients so they do actually the right thing to stay alive and reduce their risk of death dramatically. That is where the real opportunity lies. AI is not just a tool to do the same thing a little bit better when the thing we're doing is not that effective. AI, for me, is the force multiplier that unlocks the amazing new world of preventative medical intelligence. I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, ask me in the comments, and see you next time. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a board-certified physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. You should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition you have or think you have, and you should seek the assistance of a healthcare professional for any such condition. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are my personal views and opinions and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any company I'm involved in.